Welcome to another edition of Diplomatic Channel. I am Amarachi Ubani. Sadly, extrajudicial killing of Nigerians have continued in South Africa despite efforts by the Nigerian government to seek diplomatic means to end it. The latest is of 25-year-old Ibrahim Olamilekong Badmus, who was allegedly killed by South African police. A statement from the Senior Special Assistant to the President on Foreign Affairs and Diaspora, Abike Dabiri-Erewa, says, the latest incident is gradually eroding the confidence of Nigerians in South Africa on the determination and ability of the South African authorities to put a stop to further and deliberate killings of Nigerians in South Africa. The statement says the Nigerian consulate in South Africa, the Independent Police Investigative Directorate in South Africa, has begun investigation into the killing, and this will be the first time an independent unit will be conducting such an investigation. The killing of Ibrahim will be the third in a month and comes barely 3 weeks since another Nigerian, 27-year-old Kingsley Carey, was killed through extrajudicial means by the South Africa police. Despite the alleged injustice, the message out there now is for calm and patience and hope that the Independent Police Investigative Directorate will do a thorough job. In the meantime, our thoughts and prayers are with the families and loved ones of those killed. Meanwhile, South Africa's President Jacob Zuma, unperturbed by corruption allegations against him, paid a short visit to Nigeria and was guest not of President Muhammadu Buhari but the Imo State Governor Rochas Okorocha. After signing a few memorandum of understanding, the president said Africa has been undermined and the liberation of the continent will be possible if the younger generation is adequately equipped educationally. A day before he made the trip to Nigeria, the Supreme Court of Appeal in South Africa ruled that President Zuma must face charges of corruption, fraud, and racketeering and money laundering, charges that had been set aside 8 years ago to allow Zuma to become president. Zuma's office has described the ruling as disappointing but anticipated, as he had expected the National Prosecution Authority to consider representations from his legal team before making a decision about whether to prosecute him. The opposition party, the Democratic Alliance, however, wants prosecutors to move immediately to indict the president.
It's a win for the rule of law in this country and ultimately for the people of South Africa. Jacob Zuma will not defeat the ends of justice. We certainly will not watch that happen. And the reason why we continue to pursue this case is because we believe that it doesn't matter whether you are president, whether you're a minister, whether you're an MP, it doesn't matter what your status is in society. Justice must apply to all, and it must begin with the first citizen in Jacob Zuma.
However, here are other discussions in diplomatic circles. Iraqi Kurds have rejected a demand by the government that it cancels the outcome of an independence referendum as a precondition for talks to resolve the dispute. Kurdish leaders who met to discuss the crisis in the town of Dokun renewed their offer to resolve peacefully the crisis with Baghdad. In a statement read out to journalists after the meeting, Kurdish parties are ready for talks between Erbil and Baghdad, referring respectfully to the seat of the semi-autonomous Kurdistan regional government in northern Iraq and the federal capital of Iraq. They rejected what they described as military threats from Iraqi forces against Kurdish Peshmerga fighters and pledged to defend Kurdish-held territory in case of an attack. British Transport Minister Chris Grayling says he does not think Britain would leave the European Union without a negotiated deal with the bloc. Negotiations are deadlocked between Prime Minister Theresa May's government and the EU on securing a divorce settlement and agreement on future relations, raising the prospect that Britain could walk away from talks without a deal.
It's bad for the European Union if we don't have a sensible trading arrangement. But Britain will succeed. And there's nothing new about this. Theresa May, back in her speech at Lancaster House earlier this year, said no deal is better than a bad deal. And where I fundamentally disagree with John McDonnell, as we heard earlier, him saying we must do a deal in all circumstances. There is no serious business leader in this country who would enter a negotiation on the basis that accept the terms regardless of what they are. So, of course, we have to plan for an option where there is no deal. We don't expect that, we're not aiming for it, and I don't think that's where we're going to end up.
I think it would be...
Former U.S. Secretary of State Hillary Clinton says she thought the UK would face a very big disadvantage if it failed to reach a Brexit agreement with the EU.
No deal, meaning no preferential trade deals, which means products in Britain would not have the kind of easy access to the European market that you've had under EU membership. It could very well mean that there would be more pressure on businesses in Britain, if not to leave completely, at least to also have sites and employment elsewhere in Europe. I think that the disruption for Britain could be, quite...
And finally, Australia Foreign Minister Julie Bishop has played down North Korea's threats, saying the government would continue to work with allies in the region to find a peaceful solution for the Korean peninsula. The state-run television, KRT, on Saturday aired a foreign ministry statement denouncing Australia and saying the country would not be able to avoid a disaster if it continued to follow the US sanctions against them. Bishop said that North Korea was entirely responsible for the rise in tensions and minimized the threats, saying Australia was not considered a primary target.
North Korea's threats will only strengthen our resolve to find a peaceful solution to the tensions on the Korean peninsula. North Korea is entirely responsible for the rising tensions through its continuing illegal ballistic missile and nuclear weapons programs, threatening strikes on other nations in the region, and in defiance of numerous United Nations Security Council resolutions.